We had just finished looking at Fortran, IBM Mathematical Formula Translating System, one of the first computer languages. The second important early computer language is COBOL, which stands for Common Business Oriented Language. It came out in 1960 and was a direct descendant of Flowmatic from 1958. Flowmatic, or B0, Business Language Version 0, was the first English language data processing language. For the UNIVAC computer at Remington Rand, this program was created by Rear Admiral Grace Hopper. She was an American computer scientist and U.S. Navy officer. Flowmatic was an optimizing compiler which competed directly with hand-coded assembly language, tremendously speeding up the programming for computers. Now, the version of COBOL that I have is Microsoft COBOL 2.2 for DOS. It's essentially an early COBOL based on ASA, American Standards Association, 1974 specifications. So let's have a look at it. I have it installed in my COBOL directory. And I've created a source file, data.cob. We'll use the Microsoft editor to open it. And this editor has markings for the line, the cursor position for the line and the column. And this is important because this program was originally typed on punch cards. The first 7 columns are reserved for special things. Column 8 is where the actual program begins. Now, because this is a highly structured and self-documenting language, it must be precisely defined. The first part of the program always is an identification division. And in this case, I have program ID, author, installation, date written, date compiled, security, and any other things that would identify this program. Next comes the environment division for the program. This is the input-output section of the environment division. File control. Select person database. This is the name of the file. Assign it to disk. You could assign it to tape drives or whatever was available. Organization is sequential. This is all one line. It's just too long to fit on a punch card, so I continue it in the second line, and the period identifies that it is the end of the command or instruction. Next comes the data division. File section. File define person database, which is our file. Label records are standard. Value of file ID is, and here's the actual DOS file description for person database. In this case, it's C my documents COBOL database.txt. Now the file consists of records. First record at a high level is called person data, and it subdivides into name field, and that subdivides into a last name field and a first name field. And here I define or reserve the storage space for last name. The picture is 10 characters. Same for the first name. The address field consists of street number, which is 4 numeric digits. Street, city, province, postal code, and a telephone field. And all this comprises the person data records in the person data database. Now comes the working storage section. This defines variables that will be used locally in the program, in memory, rather than on disk or tape. I define a variable called number 1, number 2, which are single digit, picture 9, single digit integers, and a result, which is picture 99. Now comes the procedure division. Here's where the actual computations are done. The name of the first procedure is enter data. what we do is open, extend, person database. Basically, open the file from disk as we had defined it above. Display on the console. Enter person data using template below. Enter spaces to end the entry. Now, because this literal goes beyond column 72, we have to tell the compiler that we are continuing this literal, and we do that by placing a hyphen in column 7. And that indicates that this line is a continuation of the previous line, but we do have to requote it to end the entry. Perform type data. This is basically performing a subroutine or procedure called type data until last name equals spaces. And here I add the period. So these two lines are a loop. So we're going to perform the procedure type data over and over and over again until the last name part of the record is all blank. No more entries. After this is all done, we close the file person database, and then we perform another procedure called math test. And then I stop the program, and that's it. Now we've got to define math test and type data. These are procedures. Math test. Display on the console, multiply two numbers. Demo starts here. Enter two numbers. And this line was a little bit longer than 72, so I did have to continue it. Perform another procedure. Multiply two numbers. So here's the procedure. Multiply two numbers. Except from the console or the keyboard, number 1. That's single digit, as we defined it. Except number 2. Multiply number 1 by number 2, giving result. Look at the length of this line in English. I mean, if you look at basic program, you would say result equals num1 times num2. But in COBOL, you write this in this way. It looks like it's a very long way of writing it, but it comes in very handy when you're doing more complicated manipulations of data records. COBOL is very, very good at manipulating data records, as we will see. Display on the console, result is, and the result, which is the variable. Here's the procedure type data. Display on the console. Enter last name, first name, address, telephone. Display, and I give a template. And the reason I give it is this is a very elementary way to control so that when you're typing the last name and it doesn't quite have 10 characters, you can hit the space bar to enter blanks and then continue with the first name. This way the record will have the correct number of characters. And here's the power of COBOL. Accept person data. In other words, you don't have to enter in separately and define separately the entry of last name, first name, street number, street, city, province, postal code, and telephone. You can type them all at once and just accept it into the data record, because that's how person data was defined, as this whole length of characters consisting of last name, first name, etc. And finally, write the person data. This writes the record to the database, person data. And that's the end of the procedure type data. And that's the end of my program. Alternate, file, exit. So now we will call the compiler to compile this source code. COBOL data.cob. It suggests an object file name, data as well. That's fine. The default is fine. I do want a listing file called data.list. It's now compiling. There were no errors. Let us look at the listing file, data.list. Open it with the editor. And here you can see the listing file has added line numbers. And if there were errors, it would identify the line number and an error. In this case, we have no errors. So we can close the listing file. Very good for debugging purposes when you have an error, to look at the listing file. Okay, now we can run, this is the, after the compilation we have this object file, data.int. We can run this. This is our COBOL program. And there you go, it's starting. Enter person data using template below. Enter spaces to end the entry. Enter last name, first name, address, telephone, etc. I didn't quite finish that comment, but I know what these fields are. Smith, John, 1, 2, 3, any street, New York, New York, actually this is the city. Postal code, telephone number, next record, Doolittle, Susan, 56, Spark Street, Ottawa, Ontario, B3J, 4M5, 555, 674, 1, 2, 3, 8. And now I'm going to enter blanks for the last name, which should end this prompting. And it does. And now comes my little math routine. Multiply two numbers. Demo starts here. Enter two numbers. Single digit. 7, 8. Result is 56. So the program executed correctly. And it created the database.txt file. Let's have a look at it. These are the file markers, the field markers, and here's the first record. Smith, John, 1, 2, 3, any street, New York, New York, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, telephone number, marker, Doolittle, Susan, 56 Spark Street, Ottawa, Ontario, B3J, 4M5, and the telephone number. So there is the record in the database.txt file. So there you have it. We had a demonstration of early COBOL and early Fortran as run on a DOS machine. And eventually I am going to get the Qualstar tape drive. And we're going to have a very old-fashioned computer that basically is a simulation of a mainframe computer running on a personal computer. Thank you for watching.